The studio lights were dimmed just enough to create a mood of intimacy, their soft glow giving everything a quiet, almost secretive feel. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that happens before something important is said. Barron Trump sat across from Steve Harvey, his posture straight but relaxed, his hands resting on his knees. It was as though he was waiting, not just for the questions, but for something deeper to surface, something that had been bubbling inside him for years. Steve looked at him with a gentle but focused gaze, the kind of look that suggested he wasn't just there to interview Barron, he was there to listen, to hear what Barron was ready to share about the journey that had shaped him. Steve leaned forward slightly, breaking the silence with a question that seemed simple, but was anything but. Barron, you've lived a life that most people can only imagine, a life in the public eye. Constant scrutiny, endless expectations. But here you are, at this moment, talking about something that doesn't always show up in the headlines. Something personal, something about faith. So I've got to ask you, how does someone like you, who has had so much of his life dictated by the world's perception, find a way to trust in something bigger than all of that? Barron paused as if considering the weight of Steve's words, letting the question settle between them. His eyes were calm, but there was a flicker of something behind them, something deeper. Faith, Barron said slowly, his voice low and measured, has never been about what other people think of me. It's never been about the world's opinions or what's expected of me because of who my father is. Faith, it's about something more private, something quieter. Steve nodded, urging him to go on, his eyes never leaving Barron's face. Barron continued, his gaze drifting to the floor for a moment before he looked back at Steve. When I was younger, it was hard to feel anything but pressure. People have their own ideas about who I should be, what I should do. And yeah, I've had moments where I felt like I was drowning in it all. But then there were those quiet moments, the nights I couldn't sleep. And that's when I started asking myself questions that had nothing to do with the world. Questions that, honestly, I didn't have the answers to. Questions like, who am I really? And what am I supposed to be doing here? Steve's eyes softened, understanding clearly etched on his face. That's deep, man, he said quietly. Most folks spend their whole lives running from those kinds of questions. They drown them out with noise, distractions, and comfort. But you went into that silence and really listened. Barron nodded, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. It wasn't easy, he admitted. It was terrifying, honestly, because when you're left alone with your thoughts, there's no one else to blame for what you find. No distractions, just you and the truth of who you are. Steve leaned back slightly, taking in Barron's words. Yeah, that's the hard part, isn't it? Facing yourself without the noise of everyone else telling you what to think. But you're right, there's something powerful in that silence. It's where you find the real you. Barron let the silence stretch for a moment before he spoke again. His voice was quieter this time, as if he were still working through his thoughts. And it's in those moments, when you're by yourself, that you realize something important. The world doesn't define you. You define yourself. Faith, it's not just believing in something higher, it's believing in yourself, in who you are, at your core, away from the expectations and the noise. Steve sat up, his expression one of pure respect. Man, that's real, he said, his voice thick with admiration. Most people spend their whole lives trying to be something they're not, just to fit in. They want to be accepted, to be seen the way others see them. But you're telling me you found peace in just being you. Barron nodded slowly, his gaze steady. It took a long time to get there, he said. For a long time, I thought I had to prove something, to my family, to the world. But faith helped me see that the only thing I needed to prove was that I was worthy of my own respect, not anyone else's. Steve's eyes narrowed slightly as if he were taking it all in. That's the kind of understanding most people never get. It's like you've tapped into something most of us are afraid to even look at. Barron's eyes sparkled with a quiet intensity as he met Steve's gaze. You can spend your whole life chasing approval, Steve, he said, but the moment you stop caring about what everyone else thinks, that's when you start living. You find your voice, your real voice, not the one shaped by others. Steve let out a soft chuckle, leaning forward again, clearly impressed. Man, I wish I'd had that kind of clarity when I was your age, he said. It's hard to even imagine it with everything you've had to face. But here you are, not just surviving, but thriving in the face of all that noise. Barron smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes as he looked down at his hands. I don't always feel like I'm thriving, Steve. There are days when it feels like the world is just too loud. But those are the days I lean into my faith the most. Because even when everything is falling apart, that's what holds me together. Not the world's approval, not fame, just the quiet understanding that who I am is enough. Steve's expression softened, his voice turning quieter. You know, Barron, I think that's what most people are searching for, peace with themselves. They're just too afraid to sit with the silence long enough to find it. Barron nodded. It's scary at first, he said, but when you find it, there's nothing more freeing. Steve sat back, his eyes lingering on Barron for a moment, as though seeing him in a new light. You're wise beyond your years, man, he said, a hint of awe in his tone. And I think, with everything you've been through, you found something that a lot of people spend their whole lives looking for. Barron looked up at Steve, his gaze calm but steady. I don't know if I found all the answers, he said, his voice quiet but sincere. But I've learned that the questions don't have to be scary. They help me grow. They help me understand who I am. And that's what faith is about, trusting that I'm on the right path, even without all the answers. Steve paused for a moment, taking in Barron's words. You know, man, he said, his voice gentle, a lot of people run from those questions, the ones that challenge everything. But you've learned to face them head on. Barron nodded slowly, his gaze distant. For a long time, I avoided those questions. I was scared of what I might find, of who I might really be without all the labels and expectations. But at some point, I realized I couldn't keep running. I had to face it. Steve leaned forward, his expression filled with respect. That takes a lot of courage, man, to stand in the face of all the noise and figure out who you truly are. Most people never do that. Barron smiled faintly, a soft laugh escaping his lips. I don't know if I'd call it courage, he said quietly. It felt more like survival, trying to make sense of everything, trying to find my way in a world full of noise. He paused, his voice more thoughtful. But the more I questioned, the more I started understanding myself. Steve's smile deepened. And that's something most people never even try. You're on a different level. Barron looked down, his fingers lightly resting on his lap. Yeah, the last name, it's always there. People have these expectations, this whole idea of who I should be. It can be suffocating, and for a long time I thought that was who I had to be. But I'm starting to see it differently now. Steve nodded, his eyes warm with understanding. You're not defined by your last name, Barron. You've got your own story, and you're living it in your own way. Barron met his gaze, his eyes clear. Exactly. It's not about being perfect. It's about being true to myself, even when it feels like the world wants me to be something I'm not. Steve leaned back, a thoughtful silence filling the space between them. After a moment, he spoke again, his voice slower. And that's real strength. You've already figured out that the only person you need to prove anything to is yourself. Barron's gaze softened, his voice quiet. I wish I'd figured it out sooner, he admitted. There were times when I felt lost, like I was trying to figure it all out in the middle of so much noise. But those moments, they were the ones that helped me grow the most. Steve looked at him, his face full of admiration. Most people spend their lives trying to prove they're worthy of love, worthy of respect. You've figured out that it starts with accepting yourself first. Barron nodded, a calm certainty in his voice. I think that's it. It's not about having all the answers. It's about trusting yourself, even when you don't have everything figured out. Steve smiled, his tone filled with genuine respect. And you're doing that. You're exactly where you need to be. Barron looked down for a moment, then met Steve's gaze with quiet confidence. I don't know where the road leads him, he said, but I'm okay with that. I'm learning to trust that it's the right path. As Barron stood up to leave the stage, the conversation lingered in the air. The cameras had turned off and the lights had dimmed, but what had just been shared between them, this quiet, unspoken truth, would stay with both of them. It was clear that Barron had found something far more important than a public identity. He had found peace with who he truly was. Let's keep the conversation going. Subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts below. Your perspective is valuable and might inspire others.